This week, a lawsuit alleges an algorithm chose who got laid off at Meta and allegedly targeted people on protected medical leave. Volkswagen's threatened job cuts became a confirmed number. A phrase called the forever layoff started spreading to describe something a lot of HR leaders have felt without a word for it. And in offices where nobody's been made redundant at all, the basic terms of the employment relationship are quietly coming apart anyway. Welcome to Paper Cut. Let's start with the story that took the algorithmic accountability conversation somewhere new. A lawsuit alleges that Meta's layoff decisions were made by AI, not humans. That's a serious claim on its own. It gets more serious with the specifics. The same lawsuit alleges that Meta's AI-based layoffs specifically targeted workers who had taken protected medical leave. If that holds up, this isn't a case of an algorithm producing an unfortunate side effect somewhere in its logic. It's an allegation that a legally protected category of worker became identifiable and targetable, because the tool-making decisions had access to information it should never have been weighted against in the first place. We've covered this exact mechanism before, back when the Workday hiring case was making its way through the courts. The principle is the same whether you're talking about who gets hired or who gets let go. A tool that applies the same logic to everyone at scale isn't a defense against discrimination law. It's the mechanism by which discrimination happens at scale, just faster and with worse record-keeping. 2 weeks ago, we reported Volkswagen's CEO was weighing up to 100,000 job cuts. This week, that threat became something more specific. VW's chief has now confirmed a plan to cut 50,000 jobs. And in an important twist, the board has rejected plant closures outright. That combination matters more than it might first appear. Volkswagen intends to shrink its workforce without shrinking its physical footprint. That almost certainly means the cuts land through attrition, voluntary redundancy, and simply not replacing people who leave, rather than one clean, dramatic closure announcement. It's a slower version of the same crisis. And in some ways, it's a harder one for affected staff to actually see coming, because there's no single event to point to. Now to a phrase that's spreading fast this week. And for good reason. The forever layoff. It describes something a lot of people working in HR and TA have felt without quite having language for. Not one brutal round of cuts followed by recovery. A permanent low hum of small reductions that never really stops, even while the same companies keep hiring aggressively for AI roles and posting record productivity numbers. Some workers aren't waiting around to find out which round eventually reaches them. More tech workers are retiring early specifically because they don't want to deal with AI-related changes at work. One person in that reporting put it bluntly. Many people believe the disruption is overblown, and they'd rather leave on their own terms than stick around to find out. Economists are now warning openly about the broader AI threat to employment too. A much more direct kind of language than the careful hedging that was standard even 6 months ago. This isn't just an American or a Western story either. In China, there's a graduate glut. Millions of young people entering a job market that has comparatively little use for them right now. And at the other end of the career ladder, factory workers are being left behind by China's accelerating robot rollout. Different countries, different generations, the same underlying shock landing at both ends simultaneously. Here's the part of this week's news that has nothing to do with layoffs at all, and honestly might be just as important. The job-hugging trend, people staying in roles out of fear rather than loyalty, is cracking. Half of employees now say they're actively looking to leave. That sits in real tension with separate reporting the same week showing workers are actually changing jobs less often overall. Put those two together and you get a workforce that wants to leave more than it has in years, but for now isn't acting on that desire at the same rate. Gaps like that tend to close eventually, usually all at once. One piece this week made the sharpest argument yet on office mandates specifically. Return-to-office policies function as a pay cut in disguise, once you properly account for commuting costs, lost time, and the flexibility premium employees had quietly priced into remote roles. And the employee response to all of this is showing up in some fairly visible ways. Gen Z is job scrolling in the office, on the clock, which reads less like laziness and more like a rational response to feeling underinvested in. Not every organization is heading the same direction, though. Land O'Lakes is now letting workers choose which days and times they actually work. And its flexible roles are getting 25% more applicants than equivalent full-time positions. That's a real concrete data point. Flexibility still works as a genuine competitive advantage, not just a pandemic-era leftover. Meanwhile, Atlassian, the same company that lost an unusual wrongful termination case 2 weeks ago, is now reshaping staff bonuses and remote pay rules as part of a wider shakeup, which is a good reminder that one organization can be losing in court and rewriting its own internal rulebook in the very same fortnight. A quick run through this week's cuts. Chorus confirmed layoffs at Global News. Citi CEO signaled deeper job cuts to come this year. KPMG is reportedly preparing to cut hundreds of jobs, an escalation from the 200 back-office roles we reported 2 weeks ago. GovTech Singapore is cutting 93 roles as it restructures, and WPP will cut hundreds of jobs globally before the end of this year. So, 4 very different stories this week, but one shared question running underneath every single one of them: whether an organization's stated relationship with its people actually survives contact with a difficult decision. An algorithm allegedly chose who lost a job at Meta. A board decided the shape of Volkswagen's cuts without deciding to stop them. A phrase gave language to something workers had already started responding to on their own. And in offices where nobody's been made redundant at all, the basic deal between employer and employee is fraying anyway. That's everything in this week's paper cut. Head to the article for the full write-up, every source, and the complete takeaways list. Thanks for tuning in to Paper Cut. Don't let Monday catch you off guard. Subscribe now. See you next week.